A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. This is Ghazala Amin with PRM700 Advanced Project Management within your MSPM program offering. MS in project management requires a lot of experience and knowledge. When you're going to go out in the market and you're going to show them the degree of MS in project management, a lot of people will assume that you have the experience along with the knowledge and some of the theoretical, not just the theoretical experience, but also the practical experience. All of it will come in as a second nature when you start reading up and start using reference material in addition to just the information that is being given to you as part of these lectures. So, good luck with all of that and happy reading. And let's continue on with some of the concepts that we provided in the last lecture as part of project planning. A lot of emphasis was provided on the project planning phase. Some numbers that were given, that were 60% of a project manager's time is spent on planning your project. If you think of the 60% of the time, it only shows relevance and importance of this particular phase. With that in head, let's move on. Project planning. Project planning lays the foundation for organizing, implementing, closing, as well as monitoring, evaluating, and controlling a project, with a view to realizing the project goal and objectives within the constraints of time, budget, the requirements, and meeting or exceeding your stakeholders' expectation. So, think of how important the foundation is for any structure, and think of why project planning is given the importance. Project planning reduces the uncertainty and increases the understanding of the project as well as boosting efficiency in the way it is being carried out. Many project failures are attributed to mistakes and shortcomings which occurred in the project planning phase. In the last slides, we talked about high-level causes, very few high-level causes that ultimately leads to troubled or failed projects, and most of them were in the planning phases of the project. Inaccurate estimate, non-dedication of stakeholders, no availability or unavailability of the customers, team not understanding its role and responsibilities, lack of accountability on the project organization's plate. All this leading to ultimately having projects that fail. So, many project failures are attributed to mistakes and shortcomings which occurred in the project's planning phase. Project planning, a sentence to remember. Failure to plan is planning to fail. If a project manager doesn't give its due time to the planning phase, then you're setting yourself up and your team and your organization to failure. It's a sin that should not be committed. Project planning. On simple projects, planning may be undertaken by a few individuals within a short period of time at very little cost. Obviously, on complex or large projects, project planning may require weeks and months of costly work input by not just the project team and the project manager, but also involve stakeholders, which would include people and resources from your own organization and the customer's organization. So, whatever the life cycle of the project is, appropriate time needs to be spent on the project planning phase by appropriate resources and dedicated resources. Project planning. The quality of the project plan is determined primarily by the quality of the information used, the knowledge and the experience of the stakeholders who are assigned the responsibility of developing the plan and the resources and the time frame made available for it. The quality of the project plan is determined primarily by the quality of the information used, the knowledge and experience of the stakeholders. I'm putting emphasis on a lot of sentences and lot of verb. So, garbage in, garbage out. Understand that information that you're using from the charter, from the customers, is feeding into your planning phase, and the quality and the end result of the planning phase is depending on the data that is being put into the system or the process. So, ultimately, it's the knowledge and the experience of the stakeholders who are contributing to this planning phase. More experienced resources, more experienced team members, dedicated team members that are assigned to the project planning phase ultimately will lead to a good set of deliverables, ultimately leading to the success of your project. Project plans are not static entities, right? It's not a waterfall method that you get through with one thing and there is no need to ever go back and reiterate or relook at things. It's a spiral process, and you need to continue to modify and update and upgrade and continuously and continually motivate your resources to do the same for every process and for every task. Project plans must be periodically updated as and when new information which warrants a modification or revision of the project scope, requirement, specification, cost, schedule, risk, stakeholder and informational need, and so on so forth. When all that comes to light, you should have the situation or the time to go back and remodify the initial outputs. Ideally, anything that may have an impact on the project should be considered in developing the project plan. So all the impacts and probabilities that are out there and the inputs should be used by not just the project manager but the project organization and the project team along with the customer provided resources to provide and develop a great project plan. So a slide to remember now is that project plan is not one document. It is a group of several extremely important documentations or documents. Project change document, issues, risks, quality management plan, your charter, your WBS, your milestones, and so on and so forth. Multiple documents are part of your project plan. With that in the background, let's look at what we have here. The project management plan is the key deliverable output of the project planning phase. So if project charter was the key deliverable for the initiation phase, the project management plan is the key deliverable, or the project plan is the key deliverable output of the project planning phase. The plan will include, inter alia, specific information on the individual project activities and tasks that need to be performed, why they need to be done, when they will be done, and who will do them, what resources are needed, and what criteria must be met in order for the project to be considered successful. So the who, what, when, why, how, all these questions need to be answered as part of your project management plan document. Remember, you are only on the drawing board right now. Nothing has happened. No execution has taken place. All of it is on the drawing board and can be modified as frequently as needed. The project planning phase. If we look at the PMI standard, this would be a good time to look at what goes into the project plan. Project plan phase touches each and every knowledge area. Another knowledge area that just recently or will be added soon as part of the PMBOK 5th edition will be the project stakeholder management also. So at this point in time, let's focus on the 9 knowledge areas: the project integration plan, the scope plan, the communication plan, the project cost plan, the project time plan, the project quality plan, the project risk plan, the project human resource plan, the project procurement plan, and many more. All these plans, all these documents are individual documents, and think of them as little individual folders underneath the title of project plan folder. Multiple documentation can go, for example, under, let's look at project cost plan. Multiple documents will go under the project plan document folder. So the key to understand is that project plan is combination of many documents, and think of it as a folder consisting of multiple folders underneath it with planning data to be used as guiding force for the project manager for successful implementation of the project during the execution and the monitoring and the control phase. Most of the discussion that we had right now has already been discussed. Has already been discussed in the previous lectures, and this was like a summary understanding the importance and critical nature of the planning phase. At this point in time, one important aspect to remember again is that project plan constitutes of multiple project plans. So the project management plan has multiple plans underneath it. Why so much importance and emphasis? And the reason is that it's the most commonly misunderstood fact by many educated project managers. And that is something that we need to reiterate and understand as part of this education. So let's talk about the selected tools in project planning. One important aspect is the work breakdown structure. So what is a work breakdown structure? We'll talk again about work breakdown structure in the project scope management lectures. So work breakdown structure divides the whole project into work elements that represent singular work unit assigned either to the organization or to an outside agency, such as a contractor or a project partner. The underlying philosophy of the WBS or the work breakdown structure is to divide the project into assignable work packages for which accountability can be expected. Projects are planned, organized, and controlled around the lowest level of the WBS, that is the work package. So ultimately the activities need to be at a level where they are assigned to a human resource or to a resource, and the reason for assigning to an individual resource would be to accomplish the accountability aspect of it. When things fall apart or when things are successful, that is the accountability and responsibility of an individual team member. And that is the best level for any WBS. Some of it is achievable, some of it is not achievable, depending on the nature of your project. And all is fair. So what is a WBS or a work breakdown structure? It is taking your project, the ultimate goal of your project, and dividing it into sub-activities from A to Z. Subdividing into manageable tasks. Obviously, the first round of it, you will not just divide it into several activities. You will do this activity of dividing and subdividing in several reiterations. You can do the first level of division based on different criteria with few members. You can drill down by adding more team members, and then further dividing it into tasks by having a selected group of team members who will be responsible and accountable for those tasks. And at this point in time, the estimate becoming a budget kind of comes along also, that idea, that notion. So let's use an example to understand what we're talking about. Think of a banquet. Any banquet that you're planning on being responsible for, or as a project manager, you're responsible for arranging. So the level 1.0 will be your banquet. Further dividing it into group of activities. Your level number 2. 1.1 could be planning and supervision, your dinner, your room and equipment, the guests, the staff, and the speaker. From this point onwards, you have 6 groupings of high-level activities. Level number 3 is when you subdivide, for example, the planning and supervision tasks. What would be under the planning and supervision? Planning, budget, disbursement, reconciliation, coordination. Better still, using another example, would be under the banquet, use dinner, 1.2. To come up with dinner, what will you do as a project manager? What would you be responsible for? Obviously the menu, the shopping list, shopping, cooking, serving. Menu for the level 3 will be 1.2.1. Shopping list will be 1.2.2. Shopping 1.2.3, so on and so forth. If I look at the guests, in the first round, I divided it as a project manager, I divided into the second level. When I want to break it down and take it down to the next level, level number 3, I'm going to take the guest list or the guest item or the guest activity and further drill it down to guest list 1.4.1, 1.4.2 as the RSVP, 1.4.3 as the name tags, and so on and so forth. If I want to further break down, I'm going to further indent it into guest list. For example, if I took 1.4.1 and further drill it down to reserved, VIP guest, general audience. If I want to further drill it down into VIP, protocol, security arrangements, reserve tables. Under security, I could further drill it down to escort, guards, etc., etc. Right? With this is taking banquet and drilling it down depending on how important, how large, or how complex that banquet is. What kind of guest are we expecting? What kind of menu, what kind of dinner are we expecting? Simple or complex? That will dictate how complex or simple your WBS or your difference or level of activities are put in. Another example, if I look at a conference, for example, this is another way of putting the WBS. Speakers, venue, marketing, registration. Some high-level groupings of breaking apart the conference. Under the speakers, you will subdivide your tasks. Decide topics, decide speakers, arrange speakers, brief speakers, so on and so forth. Under deciding topics, you can actually have topic number A, topic number B, topic C, topic D. Under each of those topics, you will have data, sponsors, literature reviews. Under registration, for example, create register, register applicants, send confirmation, arrange banking, obtain approval from committee, balance account. Under approval from committee, you will have subsequent breakdown or drill it down to your parent organization or the customer supporting, the sponsors, the flyers, the venue for actual sign-off, media. Is it important enough to have media capturing that commitment? Let's look at another example. So if you look at filling vacant post of any very common example, the job, the candidates, and the selection. On top of anyone or any project manager's head, these are the different criterias. You can actually come up with more as the first level of breakdown. At the second level, if we want to look at the job, at the subsequent, you can have two levels. So 1.0 being the first level, 1.1 being the job, 1.11 being the need, and 1.1.2 being the job specifications. Underneath it, you can further drill it down. The need also has a budget, the options, and the approvals. The job specifications again will have the job, the description of the job, the timing, how long will I need, the duration, the person or persons, On top of my head, I can also think of skill set. And on top of my head, I can also think of a training plan or new employee orientation plan, so on and so forth. Any goal, any objective that is required to be done as a project. Again, remember the definition of the project: unique, temporary endeavor taken to create a product or a service. So any product or service that needs to be delivered, first level is always that particular requirement. The next level is the first drill down by grouping, organizing, logical breakdown, and then drill it down within each of those levels. More clarification of different ways a work breakdown structure can be set up. So let's think of a product, a mountain bike, right? Under the mountain bike, the few things that you can think of would be the wheel systems, the gearing systems, the frame system, the seat, and the brake. There could be multiple more at that level. But just as illustration, under the wheel systems, you can divide it into hubs, rims, and spokes. For any mechanical engineers out there, you can think of multiple more, and that is fair, right? Just understand one thing. The first level is understood, right? It's that product or the service that needs to be delivered. Don't add too many tasks. Try to have a logical grouping as level number 2. A summary of logical grouping. Underneath each of those headers, level 3 is drilled down to ensure completion of the level 2. And then keep drilling down. Level 2 on a simple project should not be more than 10 or 11. And I hate giving numbers, so let's remove that number game. Don't give any numbers to it. But keep it at a summary, in a summary state, as a logical grouping. And then subsequent drill down into level 3, 4, 5, until you get to the lowest level, which is the work package. An example that everybody loves to give, because remember that slide where we had the construction and all these organizations in a project environment, construction being up there, and it's a typical example. We all will and would want to actually get into a situation where we are building a house which is unique, it's temporary, uses up time, uses up money, and should meet or exceed the customer's expectation. So if you look at the house construction, and we want to put it into 3 high-level criterias: the foundation or the basic laying of the foundation, the rough construction, and then the finished construction, or the finishing aspect of it. Foundation is the forms, the poured concrete, the blocks. the rough structure that comes into effect. Moving on to the rough construction, now you have the whole structure standing there. Now you have the framing, you have drains, you have supply pipes. You can always, again, this is just illustration for example purposes. You can think of electrical wiring, you can think of plumbing, you can think of marble that puts in, that still is in the initial phases of it, up to the plastering of the walls. And then under the finished construction, the in-wall wires, which is the electrician work, the fixtures, the trim, and then the basic finishing is where all the work will be done, the last painting, enameling, kitchen cabinets, the bathroom tiles, and so on and so forth. Anyone who's ever constructed a house will understand that this work breakdown structure can be taken to several different levels. The hardest will be taking it to the individual level. The easier will be you have it under maybe the painter group, or the polishing, or the carpenters, the electrician, the plumbers, the tile, the bathroom fixtures, to the mason, right? If you try to take it down to the level of individuals, then it will become extremely complex. So it's easier to keep it at a level where it all makes sense, and still you can capture the responsibility and the accountability aspect of the project, right? So that was an easier example. Let's look at a software product release for an example. At level 1, it is the software product release. At the next level is the project management, the product requirements, the detailed design, the development, integration and test, and you can also break it down into further high level, but try to restrain yourself and constrain yourself to smaller number of groupings that you can subdivide it into further iterations. So under project management, we are subdividing it into planning, meetings, and administration. Product requirements, it's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. The detailed design, let's look at that carefully. Under the detailed design, we've decided to break it down to software, user documentation, and training program and materials. So 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. Under the software, if you want to further drill it down for responsibility and accountability aspect, we're going to divide it into two main groupings: the client and the server. That will be 3.1.1 and 3.1.2. For anyone who is working in the IT industries, me and you will understand that this is extremely simple representation of a software product release. Under the client or the server, you can have multiple iterations. But again, keep yourself away from the tendency of drilling down into a lot of details in the initial aspects of it. The drill down will happen once teams are assigned, once responsible and accountable individuals or teams are assigned to, for example, the client. The team will then pick up that client activity and drill it down within their own team. And that will become part of your initial work breakdown structure, right? So allow the team and allow the team members, the project team members, to drill down into more details and subsequently add those details into the major work breakdown structure, major work plan. When you talk about the WBS, the next important idea within the planning phase will be your organization chart, the project organization chart. And look at a very simple representation of it. At a high level in a projectized environment, or even in a strong balance matrix or a strong matrix organization, project manager will be the topmost person who is responsible and accountable for the doings or happenings within a project. Underneath it, you will assign the work breakdown structure activities to individual team delegates or individual team leads. So the project team member deliverable 1, project team member deliverable 2, project team member deliverable 3. These are, or possibly could be, technical leads, web lead, the Oracle lead or the database lead, the DBA, the database administrator, for example, and so on and so forth. Underneath it, you will have project team member sub-deliverable 2A, the project team member sub-deliverable 2B, and then to the next level, you can have individual team members' name like Ali, Sarah, Usman, so on and so forth, doing individual tasks. These individual members may or may not have subsequent team members reporting to them. But you always start off with group or individuals responsible for doing the work. At level number 2 and level number 3, they are usually groups and they're usually not responsible individuals. It's groupings. For example, the web development team or the database developers or the DBAs, and I'm using IT as an example. And then you come down, subsequently getting down to the individual resource accountability. We used the word responsibility and accountability several times during this presentation already. There's something called a responsibility assignment matrix, RAM. And for the responsibility assignment matrix, we use something called the RACI chart. It's the responsible, accountable, consult, and inform, RACI. If you look at the RACI chart, all the activities are listed and all the project team members are listed. Depending on how big or how small your project is, if it's a large or complex project, you can never get down to individual names. You will only get down to little team groupings or organizations. In this example, we are using individual names. So if it's a 4 or a 5 member team, you will list down their names and say whether they are responsible, they're accountable, they're consulting or subject matter expert in this case, or they just need to be informed. Okay, so let's look at defining. Alia is actually accountable for it. Remember the definition. This would be a good time for all of you who are listening to it to do a little search, not just from the presentation, but also going out and finding the difference between responsible and accountable. Responsible is doing the work. Accountable is responsible or take the blame game for the success or failure of that task or project. So go out and do a little research on the difference between responsible and accountable. So in the definition phase, Alia is accountable Sarfraz is the only person who's responsible. In an ideal situation, one person is only responsible for doing one thing. Either you can be accountable or responsible. Again, Kaisar, Farhan and Amjad are only to be informed. It could be customers, it could be project sponsors, it could be your own team as project managers. They are only there to be informed. Under the design, one person is accountable, one person is responsible. There are two who are there for consulting purposes if needed. Again, under the development, you see the same person being accountable and the same person being responsible. So design and development for IT, anyone who has the IT experience would understand that these two things go hand in hand. Again, under the testing, one person is accountable and one person is responsible. Three others are there only to be informed of the result of the testing phase. That is the RACI chart. R for responsible, A for accountable, C for consult, and I for inform. For the project linear responsibility chart, similar to the RACI chart, let's look at a linear representation. One is the actual responsibility, two is general supervision, three must be consulted, four is may be consulted, five is must be notified, six is approval authority. So the responsibility, accountability under the supervision, 3 and 4 are under this similar area is consult, but may be consulted and must be consulted. 5 must be notified under as same, almost same as information. But number 6 is approval authority. These are your sponsors. Okay? Could be your sponsors or could be a project manager, anyone who has the approval authority for you to proceed on. If I look at all the activities and I look at, now these are not names of individuals, it could be many individuals under this grouping. So a general manager, usually a one person, manager of projects, a project manager, or functional manager. Functional manager and line managers are the same. If you are doing a little read up of reference material, you will realize that in project management books, this functional manager and line managers are terms that are used for the same entity, almost the same entities. Look at all the activities and look at the responsibilities or who will be doing it. Under the approval authority, if I just look at number 6, you notice that the general manager has some responsibility of signing, manager of projects, project manager has none, and functional manager has none. Let's bring up something at this point in time. Remember my sentence or few sentences about needing a sign-off to move from one phase to the next phase? Project manager and my conversation around project manager never has that authority? Yes. It's the project organization or the project customer or the sponsors that have that authority for you to give you leverage to or give you the authority by signing on a document saying, yes, all looks good, proceed on. Okay? So that's always the upward communication, the upward managers or the sponsors within your own organization as a project organization or your customer's organization. Somebody out there will sign off by looking at a tangible piece of document and saying, yes, all looks good, move on to the next phase of the project. While we're talking of all this, Gantt chart is also a typical word that you will hear. Gantt chart is a pictorial depiction of the activities and its duration. It gives you that high-level understanding. The first line is the level 1.0. Shows you the initiation to the closure duration. When did the project start to when the project ended? And subsequently, all the level 2s, and if I drill it down, the level 3s, or if I further drill it down, level 4. These could be linked or may not have dependencies. They can actually, we have planned them to start at a certain time. If you look at arrows, there are little, those are not arrows, but these are little diamonds, the red highlighted diamonds. Inspection or structural rebar. These are milestones. Milestones are zero duration activities. The zero duration activities are out there as reasons to celebrate or to understand that a certain group of activities have successfully completed to come up to this level. Usually the milestones have linkages. So if any preceding information or activity is delayed, the milestone is delayed too. Let's look at this Gantt chart, and now you will understand the linkages and delaying aspect of what I was talking about. This is directly from Microsoft Project, a very popular software tool that we all use as project managers for tracking our projects and monitoring and controlling it. So if you look at the conduct interviews at the first level, underneath it you will see several activities and they are linked. That means until and unless you conduct interviews, you cannot administer the questionnaire. The read company reports is an independent task, started and ended, and the person who was responsible for doing that activity was Michael Hemmer. You will see individual's name at that level if they were responsible for that particular activities. Let's look at activity number 2, administer questionnaire, and there was a person who was responsible for completing that task. There's a linkage to analyze those data flows. Until and unless Jimmy Buffett gets done administering the questionnaire, Gordon Moore will not be able to start this task. That means if instead of taking 10.5 days, Jimmy Buffett decided to take 15 days, Gordon Moore will not be able to start this activity until the completion of that. So now, all of a sudden, Gordon Moore's activity, which was the 42-day activity, is now getting delayed by, if we say started off at 10.5 getting delayed to 15 days, then 4.5 days will be added to the 42 days. And the reason why I'm telling you all this is because I'm leading you to the next few slides which will clarify some of these concepts for you. But start thinking of the word lead or lag or precedence. While Gordon Moore's activity is delayed because of Jimmy Buffett's delayed, and I'm again using hypothetical situation, introducing prototype will also get delayed because both those activities are linked to activity number 2. When Gordon Moore starts, introduction or introducing prototype activity will also start. Subsequent activities from introducing prototype are all linked together. Any delay in any of these tasks will delay the following or subsequent tasks. Another Gantt chart example. These are all activities and looks like a construction WBS or a W work breakdown structure task. All of it is pictorial representation of data. So you can look at it and kind of estimate time of how long will it take. You can condense it, you can expand it, you can look at to the detail of weeks or days, and you can compress it to see how long will it take in matter of years. No matter what is needed, it can easily be done, and Gantt chart is that pictorial representation that helps you or assists you in achieving that objective. A project network diagram, the node, with the leads, the lags, the examples that are out there. Let's look at some terms and terminologies. At this point in time, I would suggest that you take out a piece of paper and a pencil and start doing some and get ready for calculations. An important aspect of project time management. If you look at that first block, look at the upper left-hand corner, the early start. Then there's an early finish. There's a late start and the late finish. Something called a slack, and the activity description and the activity duration. Let's start off with upper left corner, early start. When can the activity start at the earliest? Early finish. When can the activity finish at the earliest? These two terms are dependent on the activity duration. So, next group is the bottom left corner. It's the late start. And the bottom right corner, which is the late finish. Late start is when can the activity start at the latest, and late finish being when can the activity finish at the latest. Don't think too deeply into these situations. Once we start the calculation, all of it will start making more sense to you. Two important definitions which I would like to talk about. And we will reiterate that when we start the calculations. Slack. The time for which the project activity can be delayed, also called the float. You could be tested upon it, and you could be asked that situation in a lot of different scenarios. The time for which the project activity can be delayed. Depending on the predecessors, you always have that time that if you delay a certain task, or if a task takes longer than initially expected, the end line or the deadline of the project will not change. The ultimate end date of the project will not change because of some delays in some tasks. And there are some tasks out there where you can actually delay that task and nothing will happen. But then there are some tasks which, if get delayed by a single day, will ultimately result in delaying of the project end date by that day or by a day. With that mindset, let's read the definition of the critical path. The critical path of a project is the sequence of activities that determine the project completion date. Any delay in any activity or an activity comprising the critical path will delay the project by a corresponding amount of time. So, there are some activities out there that if they get delayed by a certain amount of time, depending on the slack, doesn't change the end date of the project. But if your activity or if a activity falls on the critical path, then every day's delay or every hour's delay will subsequently delay the project end date by the same hour or the same amount of days. All this will be clarified by an example. Project network diagram example, and we are using network components and details. You're using Coal Business Information Center as just a hypothetical situation. Let's assume A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, 8 activities. And it's a high level group of activities, maybe at a level of WBS level of 2. And these are linkages, the preceding activities, so they are dependent on a certain activity's completion before you can start off a new one. Approval of application, construction plans, traffic study, service availability check, staff report, commission approval, wait for construction occupancy. The important thing now is to understand that the start of the activity is A, which starts with approval of application. Until that approval is done, B, C, and D cannot start. And as soon as the approval is done, you can start off activity B, C, and D. Staff report, activity E, cannot be started until 2 activities are completed, B and C. F, commission approval, is dependent on completion of 3 activities, B, C, and D. Wait for construction and occupancy. Let's look at the pictorial depiction of the same scenario. Let's look at a pictorial depiction of this. The project network, if I look at A, approval of application, until the approval of application is done, your B, your C, and your D cannot get done. Moving on, when B gets completed, E can happen and F can start. At the completion of C, E and F can get started. Service availability check, once that is done and the traffic study is completed, F can start. If I move on, these are all the dependencies shown by different arrows. So what are these numbers? is called the forward pass. We start off from, let's look at this one. The first, this is based on that slide that we've shown. This is the early start. This is the early finish. And this will be the duration for activity, which is the application approval, activity A. Your early start for all of these activities will be the early finish of the preceding tasks. Your early finish for these activities will be 5 plus 15 gives you a 20. For C, early finish will be 5 plus 10 giving you 15. For activity D, the 5 early start plus the activity duration will give you 10, which is your early finish. Let's look at activity E. You were dependent on two activities, activity B and activity C. What's the larger of the number? That means if you cannot start activity E until finish of both B and C, obviously B taking longer time, you cannot start E until the 20th day, which is the early start of activity E. Early finish for activity E now will be 20 plus 15, giving you the early finish of 35. Looking at F, 20, 15 and 10 are the early finishes of 3 activities that we were dependent on, B, C and D. The largest number is the 20. So, for activity F, 20 will become the early start. Duration is 10. So, your early finish will become 30. F feeds on to G, 30, 170 being the duration of this activity, and the early finish is 200. H, occupancy cannot start until the end of E and G. So you have to wait until G gets done, which is going to take 200 days. Irrespective, your early start for H will become 200. Duration for occupancy will take 35 days. So the earliest you can finish is 235 days. This was called the forward pass. Forward pass from activity A to H. Now let's look at the backward pass. So now I've done my early start, early finish and duration. The largest number out there will become my late finish. Late finish minus the duration will give me the late start. And that's the backward pass. The sooner, look at the early start, 200, In the backward pass, I'm going to use 200 as my late finish. Late finish, 200 minus 170. Late start, this becoming my late start. What's the smallest number now for this activity? Using my late start, 30 minus 10, 20. In this situation, 185, late start feeding into two activities, B and C. So, out of these two, it's 185. If I look at my F, 20, 20, 20 and 20. Now let's look at the smallest number that's feeding into it becomes my late finish. In this case, look at the two arrows that is feeding into B. This one and this one. What's the smallest number? The 20, being my late finish. In this situation, I have a 185, I have a 20, so late finish will be 20. In this situation, 20. Moving on, 20 minus 15, 5, 20 minus 10, 10, 20 minus 5, 15. So, this arrow is the late start, late start, late start. And what's the smallest number out of the 5, 10 and the 15? Obviously the 5, which becomes the late start for my A. What was the duration from before? 5. 5 minus 5 will give me a 0. If you notice, in the initial, the first process or first activity, the early start and the late start both match. Any confusion? I'm hoping that if you start the calculation, you'll understand it. In this situation, when there was a 185, you take the late start and you put it on every arrow that's feeding into this box. Then, once you get to put in the numbers on all the arrows, then you look at the smallest number getting fed by the arrow. For example, for B, there was 185 and there was a 20. What's the smallest number? The 20, which becomes the late finish. For C, there are two arrows that are feeding into C, the 185 and the 20, so you take the 20. In this situation, there was only one arrow, and so the 20 takes the late finish of it. And this is the backward pass. Let's move on. Now let's look at, now we have all of the late start, late finish, late start, late finish, early start, early finish, and then the duration. So this would be early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and activity duration. These 5 boxes are already filled up with the description of the activity. Now we're going to calculate something called the slack. So how do you calculate the slack? You start off with the backward pass. You start off with Now, what are we doing here? We are taking slack is nothing but late start minus the early start and late finish minus the early finish. $235 early finish and late finish, early start and late finish. The result is a 0. Let's look at the next one. Early finish, late finish, early start and late start. The result is a 0. Let's look at some other example. 200 minus 35, 165. Late start minus the late finish, depending on the definition, gives you 165, same answer. Coming down, the subtractions gives you the 0, whether you're doing the late start minus the early start or the late finish minus the early finish, whatever the formula you're using, you will always come up with the same answer, and the answer is a 0. So on so forth. If I look at B, the slack is a 0. If I look at C, 20 minus 15 or 10 minus 5, the answer is 5. 20 minus 10 or 15 minus 5, the answer is 10. And the last one is usually always 0. Okay? So, we are going to define our critical path. In this situation, the critical path where you have no slack, that means that any delay in any of these activities will subsequently delay the end product or the end result, is A, B, F, G and H. If you look at all the zeros, that means any delay, you have slack of 0 or you have float of 0. The critical path is A, B, F, G and H. Any delay in any of these activities will delay the subsequent end product. That means every day that you will be getting delayed, your end date of your project will also get delayed by a day. 2 days, end date or end delivery date is delayed by 2 days also. A suggestion for all of you who are listening to the lecture is to take out a piece of paper and try to solve this on your own. This will clarify what is required of you. Solution of network diagram is an important criteria in project management methodology. In any of the standardized tests that you will be taking, you will be responsible for solving these problems. So gear up and take out paper and pencil and start solving some of these. It will also clarify some of these techniques. What is a forward pass, what is a backward pass, what is a critical path, slack and the float, and subsequently crashing and some other concepts that you will start hearing and listening to in more advanced topics of project management. Hopefully the understanding of project planning phase, its importance is clear in your head, and let's move on to other more interesting topics, or other, I shouldn't say more interesting, but other interesting topics of project management. Good luck, goodbye, happy reading and happy solving solutions of local projectized network diagram. Okay, good luck, Allah Hafiz, take care, and I will see you again very soon, inshallah.